Hi, welcome to my channel where I talk about my life in grad school with IO psychology and clinical mental health counseling. So like I said, I'm in a master's program for clinical mental health counseling and a PhD program for IO psychology. In the last video, I talked about like an intro to clinical mental health counseling and what you need to do if you want to be a clinical mental health counselor. In this video, I'm talking about the same thing but with IO psychology. So I'm going to talk about intro to IO psychology, master's versus PhD, and yeah, so I have a master's in IO psychology already, so I can talk about that too. Um, so for the IO psychology, basically what IO psychology is, it's the study of organizations, applying psychology to organizational structures, relationships, and functioning. So that can go from anything from organizational development and change management to like talent management, recruiting, um, um, marketing, all sorts of things, basically. I can actually give you a list of things that I wrote. Let me find it. So consulting, measurement and change, like I kind of already said, change management. Human factors, which is actually really, really interesting. Human factors is really the study of, it kind of is what it sounds like, study of people and objects or people and environment. So you're really trying to figure out what kind of environment works best for people and for different types of people, and what kind of objects work best for you. So you probably heard of like ergonomically comfortable or ergonomically developed things. Like I think my mouse is ergonomic, but different things like that. So engineers create that, but human factors researchers can really help engineers and help organizations understand what people need and what's comfortable for them. So, for example, in my last human factors course, we mostly talked about the environment of the office or the environment of the workspace and how that can really impact employee performance and behavior, and how different people might be comfortable with different things. How do you make sure that your office is a place where people who like one type of thing can be productive and people who like a different type of thing can be productive? And also simple things like lighting and how that's important for everybody, no matter if you like this or that, unless you're somebody who has a hard time seeing, then, or who can't see at all, who's blind, then maybe lighting isn't as important for you as as the acoustics of the place. So different things like that. I really like human factors. I think it's super interesting, but that's one of the things that you can delve into in IO psychology. And you study differences in people. You can learn about coaching and basically how to be an executive coach, working one with executives, helping them to be better leaders, things like that. So there's really a lot of things that you can do with IO psychology. Basically, think of anything that has to do with organizations and anything that has to do with people, and that's what IO psychologists do. They just do, they marry the two together, and they are brought in for all sorts of things. So in a master's program for IO psychology, what you're probably going to focus on more than anything is application. So you're going to be learning about the research, but you're going to learn about how to apply the research into these case studies or role plays or your paper projects, things like that. That's mostly what a master's in IO person does. They're really practitioners. They learn the science, then they learn how to apply it to businesses. And PhD in IO psychology, you're not only learning that, but you're also learning the research side of it and how to become a researcher yourself so that you can contribute to the field of IO psychology research. And also people can teach and things like that. And you're also learning things at a more advanced and deep level than a master's level person. You're not well, for me, I have a master's already, so for me, I not only have learned, what a master's level practitioner knows, but I've delved deeper into each of those topics. For example, I don't think my master's program talked too much about human factors. We did learn about it, but it wasn't as specific and detailed as what I learned in the PhD program. So what can you do with the 2 different degrees? For a master's degree, there's a lot of things you can do. You can be an internal or external consultant. You can work in change management and development in organizations. I know somebody right now who is the director of, she's the regional director of change management for a hospital, which is pretty awesome. And she's got a master's degree in IO psychology. And then there's other people who may work as external consultants for a firm, where they go in and they meet with different organizations, and they basically try and find what the problem is in the organization, the underlying issue, and then they provide strategies on how to deal with that. And then there's some people who are executive coaches, and those are all the people that I know with an IO psychology master's degree. What they're doing. Also people that are working in HR, things like that. With a PhD in IO psychology, there's even more things that you can do. So you can do all of those things, plus you could probably work at the same firm but at a higher level. A lot of firms out here where I live, they mostly only hire PhD level or PsyD level psychologists to be associates in their field. Now there are some that are thinking of also hiring master's levels people, but they're trying to figure out how exactly they would do that, because a lot of times what external consultants do is they do assessments, and for that to happen you need to have some kind of you need to have a higher degree to understand how to do assessments, and then to even be eligible to do assessments in your state. So there's that, and then also PhDs can teach. Master's level people can teach too, but probably more. I know it's a master's level practitioner who's teaching community college, but if you want to teach at a big university or something like that, and you want to teach bachelor's or master's at graduate school, graduate level programs, you need a PhD, most likely, especially for the doctoral level programs. Wouldn't make much sense for somebody without a doctoral degree to teach, unless you're an adjunct professor, I suppose. But if you could also come into academia, like I said, but you could also do research. So I do know an IO psychologist who is a medical researcher. He works at the medical college in his state, in his town, but also in his state. And he works on, I think his research is something to do with something with heart technology. I don't really remember exactly what it was, but I was really amazed to know that he could do that, because I always figured to work at a medical college doing research you need a medical degree, but you don't need a medical degree, you just need research experience, and you need to be able to prove that your research experience can be applicable to the research that the hospital is conducting, and that you are versed in research. So that's really interesting, and a thing to keep in mind, if you are interested in research, a PhD might be the way to go, because you're not only going to be able to do practice, but you're also going to be able to do higher level research. And the next question some people ask is, do you need to be licensed to be an IO psychologist? Technically no, because there is no licensure to be an IO, at least not in my state. Now certain states there may be, so I'll take that back. It's not technically no, it depends on your state. So in my state, there is no licensure for IO psychology. There's licensure for clinical psychology, and a lot of clinical psychologists decide to become IO psychologists. That gives them an advantage when it comes to performing assessments, because in certain states, because certain assessments require you to have a certain level of clinical knowledge to perform them. However, there are IO psychologists who are also licensed therapists at the master's level, and so they can also do assessments, but they just can't do level C assessments, but they can do levels A and B. And again, everything depends on your state, though. So in my state, there is no IO psychology licensure. I think I read somewhere last year that SIOP or somebody is thinking of creating a licensure or creating something for IO psychologists to be able to call themselves psychologists in different states, because some states won't allow you to even call yourself a psychologist without that clinical licensure. But if you're not doing clinical work, it really makes no sense to call yourself that. The real difference is the IO versus the clinical in front of that psychologist part. So basically what people are afraid of, or states are afraid of, is that you're going to market yourself as a psychologist, you're going to be doing therapy work, and you really don't have any business doing it. But if you are in the IO field, you're not really doing any therapy work. You may be coaching, but that's not therapy, and you're going to be doing assessments, but only to figure out, personality strengths and things to match people up with jobs, or to match organizations up with the right candidates. And most of the time, what you're going to be doing is consulting, or not most of the time, it depends on what you want to do, but I'm talking specifically about consulting. But so yeah, they're working on that, I think, in different states. But so that's why it's really important to know, what can you call yourself with a PhD in IO psychology? Regardless of if you can call yourself a psychologist or not, you still have the doctorate. So you could still call yourself doctor whatever, and you can explain to people that you have a doctorate in IO psychology, and this is what that means. Now, if you're applying to IO jobs, they already know what that means. But just, if you are at a networking event and you happen to come across a client, a potential client, then explaining it that way helps you to not become liable, or helps them to not think that you are going to give them therapy, because that's not what you do. Also, that's important to know for any websites that you build, how you market yourself on your business card, things like that. You really have to think about those things. Okay. So the steps you need to take if you're interested in coming into the IO field, it really depends on who you are and your background. If you are a young person who is just finished a bachelor's degree, or you're trying to finish a bachelor's degree, or you're in high school and you haven't really started a career yet, then there's a lot of different avenues you can take. Some people will want to get into the bachelor's program in business or psychology. There are other people that have bachelor's degrees in things that are completely unrelated, but then they get into a master's program based on their grades or whatever, their ability to convey that they will be able to handle graduate school and finish a master's degree. And those people can, depending on what you want to do, also you have to think about that. Do you want to be a PhD? Do you want to be a master's level person? Do you want to be a practitioner? Do you want to be a researcher? Do you want to be both? Those are things that you have to think about. Let's say that you are, I think the most common thing that I see with people who want to get into IO are they have careers already that they've already established and they want to make a career change. So I'll talk about that if you have a career established already and you want to make a career change. The first thing to think about is what is your past? What is your past experiences? Do you have any experience in the business field or the psychology field at all that you'd be able to apply to this new level? If not, then you might want to go for a master's degree instead of going straight into a PhD, because you're really going to get your feet wet in the master's program, and it's going to help you to determine what you want to do next, or who you want to be as a IO practitioner. If you want to get a PhD, there are some people that I know in my PhD program who have master's degrees in other fields and have established careers in other fields, and they went into a master's or a PhD program, but they already have a master's degree. So if you want to get into a PhD program, I would suggest, and you have a bachelor's degree or you have a master's degree in another field, I think if you have a master's degree in another field, you're going to be even more likely to get into a PhD program, because they're going to know that you can handle graduate school, and they're also going to know that that you're more serious. Whereas if you're a bachelor's level person and you have established so many years in a certain field, they're really going to want to know what exactly brought you to wanting to do this and at this level, because this is a pretty dramatic change. So if you are interested in doing that, maybe you should think of a program that is one where it leads to a master's and a PhD. So there's a lot of PhD programs that end up being PhDs, but after 2 years of study, you get a master's degree. And then at that point, you can determine if you would like to continue or if you would just like to stop at your master's and be done. That's a really good option for you. Those programs are pretty competitive to get into, of course. But the PhD programs that require you to have a master's degree, they're a little bit more lenient to get into, and that's usually because people already have master's degrees that are trying to get into the PhD program. And so it's not going to be as, there's not a wealth of people with master's degrees who want to be into the PhD IO psych who are qualified and who can succeed in it. So those are things to think about. I hope that helped. It was a little bit, I don't know if that helped, but hopefully it did. So I'll talk a little bit about what it's like to be a student and what the curriculum is like. The curriculum, for me, again, it depends on your school, but most programs, they start you off with telling you the history of IO psychology. You have to learn about history and systems, and that's important with anything that you do. You need to learn about the history of the field that you're in. Then you go into ethics and legalities, and I usually don't like ethics courses, but the one that I took for the PhD program was actually really interesting, and I liked it a lot because it had case studies of actual things that actually happened to people and explained where the person went wrong, where the psychologist went wrong, and what led to the lawsuit, those types of things. I like case studies, so maybe that's why I like that class. And then you talk about organizational theory. That's important to know, too, in the psychology field. In any science field, you need to know about theories, you need to know about laws. Then you take, in my case, I took organizational development and change, and that just talks about how organizations can go through different changes throughout time and what that means for the team that's working within it. And of course, you take statistics. At a master's level, you might only take one statistics class and a research methods class. In the PhD level, I'm thinking I took 3 for the master's program, maybe 2 or 3. For the PhD level, I took qualitative research methods, quantitative research methods, statistics, and then there's another course that I took that had to do with research. And then, of course, you do your doctoral, you do your dissertation, and that's research too. So it's more focused on not only statistics, but researching, because it's a PhD. So then you move into talent management, leadership management, performance management, recruitment, selection, and placement. You talk about group dynamics and training and development. So you talk about how to create a training program and how to not only create one, but how to assess for what's it called? Progress. Was it effective? Assess for effectiveness. So you're assessing not only the progress of the training program, but you're assessing if it was effective or not, and then implementing any feedback into changing the training program for the next batch of people that need to be trained. So all of those things, and depending on what program you take, you might have more classes or you might have different classes. But I think the main ones are statistics, research methods, job task analysis, obviously ethics, individual differences I see across different curricula, and like I said, things vary depending on where you go, but you're going to see management and things like that. So I hope that helped. I know that was long. But I hope that helped you to decide on what you want to do. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Thanks.